Hello zusammen. Welcome to the very final edition of Feedback Sonntag. We've made it. All the analyzing are done. You should have seen by now that I did in fact add the feedback and give you your grade for your final analyzer. So you haven't seen that yet, excuse me, take a look at that. Look through the feedback. Make sure you understand the grade that you got. In the next couple of days, I will look through the rest of your participation grades and give you a grade on that. And then I'll send you each an email just then you know exactly where your grade stands going into the final exam, so you're everything's completely transparent and you know kind of where you're at. And depending on what you want to get in the course or just for your own knowledge, we'll let you see where you're at. Okay? So I wanted to spend this final feedback Sonntag just focusing solely on that final exam. Now you would have seen on Learn in one of the announcements, we've outlined exactly what will be covered on the exam. And when we do this because there's nothing hidden, right? What you see on that list is what will be on the exam, guaranteed. Now the format of those questions, we can't tell you that much, right? But certainly the kinds of questions that you've seen in the Intensivtraining, if you've been completing those exercises, or in that mock exam, are the kinds of questions that you'll see on the final exam as well. A lot of it is we'll give you a number of sentences to write, and we'll give you the components of those sentences, and you either will build sentences out of those components, or maybe you'll add in a word into a blank, for example. We want you to know your German, but we don't want to make anything unnecessarily complex or try to trick you either. So what you see is what you get, right? Now the exam itself will consist of a large number of those kind of not multiple choice, but choose one of the correct answers, or maybe some written comprehension, some of these fill in the blanks, some of these write sentences, and there will be a longer written question as well. We're gonna want to ask you to write a text and show your ability to write complete sentences and something that actually flows together as well. So kind of like what you've been doing in the Analyze anyways. So be prepared for that as well. But again, that's kind of the basis of the exam itself. Things to note, I suppose. The exam is 2.5 hours, and there are no aids allowed. So no dictionaries, no cheat sheets or whatnot. Just you and your knowledge of German. So come prepared with that as well. Otherwise, I'm just going to go through the items on that list and talk a little bit about each. If there's something that I think needs to be explained a little bit more. Okay, so you see the first one there is telling time. So again, it's just a matter of knowing what that kind of instruction is, right? So es ist 9 Uhr, oder for example 9 Uhr, oder es ist halb 10, right? Knowing when to include the word Uhr and when not to, and knowing to use the preposition in time for the time. So those kind of basic things. How to use Viertel, Viertel nach sechs, Viertel vor sechs, right? Just knowing time expressions, how to tell time. Personal and possessive pronouns. And possessive pronouns are again things like mein, dein, sein. More than anything, it's just knowing your pronouns, right? Knowing what pronoun relates to the subject. If you have a female, what pronoun do you use? And then what possessive pronoun would go with that as well. So just knowing your pronouns in general. Jobs and employment. We had that chapter about jobs. So knowing how to talk about one's job, knowing how to say, knowing what some jobs are, I suppose. Knowing that kind of phrase, ist X von Beruf. Knowing how to say, what someone's job is in that capacity as well. Knowing too that if it's a male with the job versus a female with the job, the female has the extra in on the end. So again, being aware of that too. Sentence construction, placing words in the correct order. That's just a basic thing that would probably be throughout the exam, right? But it's just a matter of knowing, as Sarah and I have repeated throughout the course, it's going to be subject, verb, rest of sentence. Or if it's a question, verb, subject, rest of sentence. Or if it's a modal verb, subject, verb, and then blah, 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 infinitive verb at the end. Or if it's the simple past, auxiliary verb in the second position, and past participle at the end. Regardless of what the sentence is, knowing the different ways to formulate sentences so that they are correct and the grammar is correct. So that's just basic stuff that hopefully you've been keeping track of as you go through the term. Completed conversations. There's a bit of a dialogue part in the exam, so knowing kind of how a dialogue would flow logically and what pieces of the dialogue would come after one another to make an actual logical flowing dialogue, right? Talking about directions, how to go to places. So there we had that unit, we had the analyzer, kind of giving people directions on how to get to one place. So knowing some of those direction words like geradeaus oder entlang, links und rechts, telling someone how to get somewhere, right? And knowing what verbs to use there as well. Several prefix verbs, so they're knowing what separate prefix verbs are, right? And then B as well, what to do with them, right? And that's just the idea that there is the initial prefix piece, and that we take it off of the stem of the verb, put that to the end of the sentence, and we conjugate only that stem, okay? So just knowing what to look out for, knowing what to do with them, I suppose. Certainly the modal verbs, right? We've done a lot with modal verbs, and again, it's knowing in some cases what modal verb to use, and then as well what to do with the modal verb. And again, there is just we're conjugating the modal verb according to the subject, and then we're taking the verb that goes with the modal verb in the infinitive and putting it at the very end of the sentence. And again, it stays in the infinitive there too. Imperative form, those commands. So we spent a little bit on commands, and there was also, in one of the feedback Freitags or the feedback Sonntags, I had a little bit about the imperative command and how to construct it, right? In that case, you put the verb, kind of like a question, right? The verb comes at the very beginning of the sentence, and then it's just depending on who you're talking to, that's how we know how to conjugate that verb. But again, with imperative, you're only either giving imperatives to someone singular, or to a group of people, or to a group with yourself included. So it's only really those four versions, right? With du, with wir, with ihr, and with sie. So knowing those four formulations with verbs as well. Knowing how to talk about someone's birthday and numbers in general. So just knowing your numbers more than anything, and knowing your months of the year, I suppose, as well. Knowing the past tense, right? And both the simple past and the perfect tense as well. So you can see there, something like ich ging versus ich bin gegangen, and just knowing how to formulate those. Again, we're not going to ask you to go into too many different kinds of verbs that you're going to have to use the simple past for, but certainly, or for the simple past. But for the present perfect, certainly we've done a lot more with present perfect. And there it's a matter of knowing what's the auxiliary verb going to be. Is it haben oder sein? And how do we know which one, right? Sein if the verb includes some sort of movement, and haben for the vast majority of verbs. And knowing to conjugate sein oder haben in the second position as the auxiliary verb, and then the other verb goes at the end, and you take the past participle of that verb at the very end of the sentence. And finally, as I said before, there's going to be some sort of long written exercise as well, where we're going to give you a topic and ask you to write about it. And write, I'm not sure exactly how many words, but you're looking at about 100 words, so something substantial, right? So again, I think that's more or less it for the exam. Those are the subjects that we're going to cover on the exam. None of this should be a surprise. These are the major aspects of the course. We're just asking you now to take everything you've learned and show us what you can do, right? Show us what you can do in an exam situation where, again, there are no resources. So just show us the German that you've learned, and demonstrate to us that you learned something in the course, basically. Okay? So again, as you prepare for the final exam over the next week, if anything comes up, send either Sarah or myself an email, or write in the discussion board. We'll be sure to respond to you quickly and do whatever we can to prepare you for the final exam. Otherwise, it's been a fantastic term. Thank you all for your participation, for your work this term. It's always great to see how much you have improved in your German, and hopefully you'll continue to take more German at the University of Waterloo. Okay? All the best. Tschüss.